Very pleased to welcome in now somebody new to the podcast. His name is Matt. You might follow him on Instagram. He is Matty H Cards. Matt, how are you?
Doing great, Dave. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. I've been wanting to talk to you for a really long time. I love your account and the things that you do with it. You're just unique and creative. But before we get to that, maybe just say hi and introduce yourself to people who maybe aren't aware about your collection and your tendencies and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Matt. Go by Matty H Cards on Instagram and Twitter as well. I guess X, but I don't really use it there anymore. I definitely prefer Instagram as a tool for me. I think I'm a graphic designer also, and so Instagram tends to be more susceptible to design work, I find, and I think it's a much better tool showing off my collection. Um, yeah, professional graphic designer in the sports industry. I've worked for the LA Rams, a soccer media company called Copa 90, worked for Dapper Labs like NBA Top Shot and the NFL All Day product. And most recently, I was at Underdog for about 3 years as a senior designer and a design manager there. So it's fun to tie the hobby into some of my professional work as well. But yeah, I collect mostly baseball. I'm an Orioles fan. So Gunnar Henderson is definitely my main PC that I'm after, but also Corbin Carroll and a few other guys. But yeah, you can find me at Matty H Cards on Instagram.
And you're also a Ravens fan, you mentioned before. And also, I would be remiss to not mention that you're also a fan of the University of Miami. And as
true.
we are recording this, they are 6 days away from playing Indiana for the national championship. So what is your tie to the U?
Yeah. So actually, I have family that went to the U. I have cousins that went there, and they were actually there in the prime of Miami's powers in like 2001. I vividly remember I was 10 at the time. And actually, funny enough, I was rooting against Miami in the 2001 national championship because I was a huge Eric Crouch fan at Nebraska. Not sure if anybody remember him, but he's a Heisman Trophy winner. And so I was devastated at the time. But as I got older, I grew closer to Miami and my family down there. And I am from DC, still live in DC, wanted to go south basically for college. And so Miami is about as south as it gets. And so I went there during the Ja'Cory Harris era. Not a lot of great football was played, but there were some fun moments. But yeah, I'm very excited, cautiously optimistic, I would say. Indiana looks like a juggernaut, but I think that our defense is pretty strong too. And I was actually just in Phoenix for the Fiesta Bowl. So that was a pretty incredible experience to be there for that game.
Just incredible. And I think, the U, such a polarizing college program historically, but I think whether you are a fan of the U or you're not, I think we can all agree that when Miami is good, college football is better.
Yeah, I feel like there are a few programs like that, and I like to think that we fall under that for sure. So I think between Indiana and Miami, it's kind of a change of pace from what it's been the last decade or so in college football. So hopefully people will tune in. I will not be attending the final because it is the most expensive final like since they've been tracking. Basically, it's like $3,500 to get in the door, and I'm just can't believe it. But I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be heavy Indiana fans in that stadium, even though it's in Miami.
That's why the TVs are so good these days. You'll enjoy it just as much from home, for sure. So you mentioned that you are a designer, and I followed your account for a while, but you had a post on October 31st, so a few months ago, October 31st of 25. I usually don't say this, but if you're listening to this, you might want to pause very quickly and go check out Matt's Instagram feed, Matty H Cards, and see what he put together October 31st. But for those who maybe do pause and don't look through the whole thing or just don't feel like pausing, why don't you talk about what it is that you mapped out in terms of your collecting and displaying? And I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but everything else, your philosophy toward collecting in that post.
Yeah. So basically, I kind of created this post in hopes that it may land me a job in the industry at some point. So it's sort of a portfolio piece because, again, I view my accounts as sort of just a creative outlet. As I've been buried in professional work, at times I tend to not like focus on the more personal projects and things like that. And so when I started up this account, it was kind of the perfect outlet for me to do some creative work outside of my professional work while tying it into the hobby that I had recently fallen back in love with. Um, and so this post was basically a culmination of about 2 years I'd put into this account, showcasing sort of my thought process behind both the design and the curation of the collection that I've built. And so I talk about the color scheme that I use and why I use it. I talk about the fonts that I chose and how they play with the rest of the account. And basically then go on to just sort of the ethos of my entire collection. And so it was really, really fun to work on. It's one of those that like I had the idea to come up with this sort of portfolio piece for a long time, but it was a bit daunting in my head. And then once I finally sat down and my ADHD kicked into the right the right notes, I was able to sort of power through it a lot easier than I actually thought that I would, because I was just basically uh, cultivating all of the work that I'd already done and putting it into one place.
And it's just so noticeable when you scroll through your feed. It just looks different from most people's, especially mine, everyone's. How do you approach a post? So you mentioned Baltimore. So whether it's Gunnar Henderson or Ray Lewis, any of those types of players, how do you begin to think about what you want your post to look like?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I guess this is my second full year on Instagram. And so at the turn of the first year, which I think is around March or so, I decided that I really wanted everything to sort of be in threes to fit my feed. And so if I were posting one card, I would have two subsequent posts that are of similar either cards, or the design would be linked or the same. And so it's actually kind of been a fun way to think about my collection, because while I'm doing it with design, I also do it with collecting, where if I'm collecting Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll, I like linking the card, like the Topps Heritage Red Ink. Like I would go for Gunnar and I would go for Corbin. And so that's kind of, I tend to think, what is the theme for this trio of posts? And then I find the cards that kind of fit within that theme. And then I'll go start working on creative from there.
Is this Give us a sense of what kind of process it is? Is it a matter? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 5 days? How long do you think these things through?
I think I'm constantly thinking about these things. So it's like kind of never really shuts off, but the actual creative process, I definitely have down to a bit of a science at this point. Like I use the same texturing, I use the same sort of templates. And so coming up with the unique designs can definitely take anywhere from sometimes like 5 minutes to sometimes hours. And sometimes I scrap entirely a creative that I don't really like. But honestly, it's pretty rare. It's just like comes naturally to me. I think a lot of it comes from the ideation and the work that I've put in on the front end. But then from there, actually a goal of mine for this upcoming year is to like do some sort of live screen recordings as I'm creating my templates and going through the process, because I think that would be interesting for fellow collectors to see. I've shared a bit with Short Print Today, Jake. He's seen a little peek behind the curtain. But honestly, if you'll look at some of the one touches that I share on my account, I have created just a one touch template where all I do is cut out the card and I put it into that. So it's always the same one touch. And so kind of coming up with shortcuts that make it a little bit easier on me. Like I just shared 3 Brian Wu rainbows and there were probably 20 plus cards on each post. So that was a very tedious hours long process. But yeah, I have little tips and tricks that try and alleviate some of the pain points.
So Brian Wu, the Seattle pitcher, what's your connection to him?
I just loved watching him pitch, and he helped lead me to a fantasy baseball championship a couple years ago, like as he was first coming up. And so I was just like, he's a pitcher. Nobody collected pitchers at the time. He was cheap. I liked having, while Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll was certainly not cheap, Brian Wu was kind of like a fun alternative. I think his card prices are a little bit less cheap now than they once were, which makes it a little bit difficult for me to finish off some of these rainbows that I'm chasing. But it's been super fun to basically follow him as he's come up, and he's still on my Dynasty Fantasy Baseball League for one more year. I get him before I have to redraft.
So you clearly have design education type of background. I'm going to ask you to take off your sports fan hat and your card hat for a little bit and just talk about design in general. What does good design do for an audience? A lot of times with an audience, we look at something, we think, oh, I like it or I don't like it. But from your perspective as a creator, how are you trying to connect to an audience, and what is the value of good design?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, something that I like about design is the subjective nature to it. I think everybody does have their own sorts of styles and their own tendencies and things that draw them into it. But ultimately, what I try and do with my own design is sort of create an emotion and just a feeling. And I think that's what I've done in my professional work. Like when I was working for the Rams, I would be sort of at the games live creating graphics using photos that had just occurred in that game. And then we would send them out like right as the clock hit zero. And the fans would really sort of resonate with that. And so I just love, I'm obviously a huge sports sicko. And just the emotion of sports and fandom, not to go on a little bit of a tangent, especially because I worked at Underdog, which is a gambling related company. But I do think that it's sort of overtaken some of just the pure like passion and emotion from fandom. And so I've honestly kind of gone the other way on all of that stuff and don't really enjoy it that much anymore. And I'm more trying to tap into just like the, the emotion of being a fan, and to do that through creative work is something that I enjoy, just enhancing fan experience, basically.
Sure. So when I'm artistic, mine is through writing. I have no visual sense. I can barely do a stick figure. So I apologize if this question it makes no sense whatsoever. But when you're creating one of your posts, do you have in mind what you want your followers to feel? Do you want them to feel something, or do you just want them to sort of like it?
I think, I mean, it is super linked to the cards that I'm sharing as well, which is a fun part about it. So honestly, I think that the cards are doing the heavy lifting. And then I basically just want to present them in a clean way that still has the card as the main focus. But when you're scrolling your feed, you may see my post and be, oh, that's a little bit different than the rest of what I'm seeing here. So I really think that's kind of it. Like I'm trying to not do anything too crazy that would distract the eye from the centerpiece, which is the card. But at the same time, I do love having a cohesive look and theme to my account, to my collection. And I hope that you would see that if you looked at my page.
In your opinion, in your mind, how do you think the card collector reacts to like a well-made post, a well-designed post, and they come across it, and again, they probably don't think, "Wow, look at the aesthetics of that. Look at the color palette." But sort of subconsciously, what do you think good art, a good post, can do for a follower?
Well, I will say, like, luckily from firsthand experience, I do have a bunch of people reach out to me and mention like the creative work on my account, and they can tell the effort that has gone into it and that it does look a little bit different than other sort of collections on Instagram. And so I always really, really appreciate when people can respect and understand the amount of time and effort that goes into something like this. So I do think that it resonates. I've seen some funny posts of people mentioning like how they wish that they could do what I do. And I had to tell many, many people that I am in fact a professional graphic designer. And like, please don't feel bad about yourself if you're incapable of doing what I'm doing right now. I've dedicated the last 10 years of my professional life to this. And so I'm sure I can't do what everybody else does professionally as well as they do it. So it just like, is a little bit fortunate that there's such a strong link between my professional life and then this hobby now.
So let's flip it. When you're scrolling, and we all sit there scrolling sometimes, what catches your eye? When it's not just the card, but when it's something beyond just a card being kind of cool, special, rare, what else catches your eye?
I definitely am aware of when other collectors are putting effort into their accounts, and I see some people trying to do some design work and some do it really well. But also when somebody clearly creates an environment for photography in their cards, not to give him another shout out, but Short Print Today, if you look at his posts, like his cards are all photographed the exact same way in the same place. Or I'm also a huge fan of the Spitball and Cards guys and the sort of background that they've created where it's a bunch of old cards sort of glued onto a table and they photograph it there. It's just like there's clear effort and decision making and direction behind the way that they're showing off their collections. And I think many collectors do it in their own way. So I certainly notice it when I see effort being put into it. And I will also say that I myself am horrible at taking photos of cards, and it's something that really frustrates and bothers me. And so when somebody is good at it, I really notice it. And I will usually reach out to them and be like, tell me how you do this.
Sure. So let's flip it around. Are there times when you're going through and you see what should be, a really amazing post? Either the card lends itself to it, it's the image, it's the colors, it's something, and it just falls flat.
100%. Yeah. I think I notice it just as much as I notice when somebody has a good post. Like there will be people that are sharing these absolute grails of cards and the lighting is horrible, they're blurry, they're cut off or whatever it might be. And I'm just like, oh, please, like just figure out how to take a little bit better of a photo because this card deserves it and your post deserves it too. So you definitely see a little bit of both when you're scrolling the feed.
How do you think about colors in that October 31st post that you had? You mentioned, I think, orange as one of them. You're an Orioles fan, so that makes sense. But how do you think of colors in terms of the broader idea of presenting a card?
Yeah. So basically, for my own account, my sort of core colors, and I do deviate. I don't strictly follow it, but I try to tend to like follow the same core sets of colors. And for me personally, I'm an Orioles, Ravens, Miami fan. And so you'll notice that my three colors are orange, purple, and green. And so I tied it directly to myself and my own experience. That's how I wanted to portray my collection. But obviously, I do switch it up a little bit depending on just like to complement either the card, the parallel, or the team. Like most recently, the Brian Wu rainbows that I showed off, I created this sort of rainbow color palette and design element. And so that's what I went with for those posts. So it's always pretty conscious decision making on my end, and then just figuring out the ties between the colors and the cards.
Okay. So let's turn our attention to the cards themselves. For a lot of collectors, it's a big deal when new sets come out and new years, and what's the design going to be? I would imagine for you that might be even more of an interest. So when Topps drops a new, say, flagship design, a chrome design, and I think we'll see 2026 here pretty soon, what does that mean to you when they come up with their new annual design?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the process and what the designs are going to be. I think we actually just got the first look at the 2026 design, and I think it's a pretty solid design. I don't envy the designers over there at Topps because it's a daunting task to try and come up with a one universal template that can be done well in 100 different parallels, it seems like there are these days. So you have to be thinking about it through that lens, where just because it might look cool as a base card, is it going to look cool as the Independence Day? You have to come up with the Independence Day design. You have to come up with the camo design and all of these various different now new parallels that are out there. And then you have to think about it as paper and as chrome. And so it's a daunting task. As a creative, I'm never going to crap on other creative work for sure, because I understand the effort that goes into it. I definitely have years that I enjoy more than others in terms of design. But looking at this 2026 one, I think it's really pretty solid. It feels similar to 2025 to me. The only thing I don't love is the nameplate on it and the amount of drop shadow, because I feel like that's sort of what I used to do when I was starting as a designer, was just throw a ton of drop shadow on there. And I think that's what you sort of see. But other than that, I think it's a really solid base. And honestly, as the years go, I tend to enjoy the designs or get used to them a little bit more. Like I would say 2024 was nothing special to me at the start. And now all of a sudden it's probably in my Mount Rushmore of favorite designs from the 2000s. So things can definitely grow.
Yeah, you see design clearly different than I do, but when 2024 first came out and they were showing the flagship Series 1, my mind immediately went to, oh, this is designed for Chrome. That's why this is. Do you see something similar? Do you see sort of like a grander plan when a design comes out?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. You can envision, again, how it's going to look in Chrome, how it's going to look in flagship, what parallels are going to come out. So I'm definitely thinking about it, but it can be hard to truly envision. I do feel like 2024, when you saw it, you were like, oh, okay, this is going to look pretty sweet in Chrome. But even the paper has definitely grown on me. Like, I think the Independence Day design is probably my second favorite to 2018. And I think 2018 is many people's favorite. And piece of me is like, is it because it's Otani, Soto, Acuna, like all of these guys? Does that make people like it more? Or is the design actually that good? But I do think that the design work is awesome for that year.
It does feel like a thankless job, right? Because there are people who don't know how to design telling the designers their work sucks.
Yeah. You definitely have to have some thin skin, I would say, when you're creative, because again, design can be so subjective, and something that somebody loves, somebody else hates. And so I think that you tend to just kind of have to choose to ignore. But obviously you hope that the public sentiment is overly favorable, but you're never going to please everybody.
So you mentioned you have sets that you like and some that you don't. I'd like you to take us through what are 2 or 3 off the top of your head, maybe some of your favorite sets. But then when talking about them, also explain why you like them.
Yeah, for sure. I'll stick with Topps. I think my favorite Topps designs are 2003 and 2008, which are both like kind of quirky designs, I would say. 2003, if you're not familiar, it features like the player headshot in a little baseball diamond on the bottom corner. And like a lot of people actually dislike that, but for me, I love it. And also, I just do think part of the reason why I'm drawn to this hobby is nostalgia and reliving childhood, obviously. Like, I'm sure many people feel the same. And 2003 happens to be a year that I vividly remember collecting. And so obviously I'm going to be drawn towards it from that sense. But I like a more unique design. Like I said, I think 2025 and 2026 are looking fairly similar. And then honestly, like 2020 to 2023 all kind of blend, maybe even 2019 in there too. I think so. Finding something that looks a little bit different. And I think 2008 is the one where the team names are at the top in different alternating colored circles. And so it's just like definitely not a design for everyone. But for me, it's just like so iconic and it's so different from what else they were doing. And so those are probably 2 of my favorite Topps designs over the years. And then to just touch on a couple of sets, like, yeah, my own personal design style is very, I would say, simplistic and vintage. And so obviously I'm going to be drawn towards a Topps Heritage or an Allen and Ginter and a Stadium Club where the photography shines through. So those are probably 3 of my favorite just sets.
I love that you brought up 2003. I love that Topps acknowledges the every 20-year thing where they put the extra photo down, right? So 23 had it, 03 had it, 83 had it. Yep. It just shows that they are, in fact, thinking and not just cranking, although they are cranking stuff out. But at the same time, there's somebody in there who understands the history. And I think history has to be a big part of it, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, you saw it with 2023 too, where they did my boy Corbin Carroll very dirty with the photo they selected of him. I don't know how it's possible to make Corbin Carroll look obese, but they did do it. But still, like, it is just a cool, the linking between years and sets. And obviously, I think we're coming up on the 75th anniversary, I believe they're starting to promote and hype up with the 2026 release. So I'm really excited to see how they tie that in. And hopefully it's a bit of just a celebration of a lot of the design work and the sets that have released over the years.
Did you collect, since you are a Ravens fan as well, did you collect any Panini products for the Ravens?
So very little, but it's actually funny that you mentioned that because I have one Lamar Jackson card and it's a 2018 Downtown. So a very sort of desirable card. I picked it up a few years ago. It's gone up a ton since then, but Downtowns in general have sort of started to rub me the wrong way. One, because Panini implemented AI art, I think in 2024, maybe, whereas you look at the fields, the field lines are completely off and the skylines have no relation to the actual city. And so, sort of pairing that with just the case hit craze that feels like it has taken over has sort of rubbed me the wrong way on cards like that. But of course, this Lamar is original art. It's low print run. So it is an awesome card, but I still have a little bit of a weird feeling about it. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. So I collect a little bit. I mentioned I'm a Kyle Hamilton collector too. And while many people use Prism as the sort of gold standard, I would say it just has never been my favorite design wise. And so I actually like Select, which is probably like the third tier set, but it's my favorite. So you'll find that I have mostly Select cards if I'm collecting Ravens or the rare Washington Wizard as well.
So you must be somewhat curious and excited then for Topps to take over the football license as well.
For sure. Yeah. I'm really curious. I think while Panini did some good things with their case hits, I think that honestly Topps has done a lot of incredible work with theirs that is sort of going overlooked because they're just, for some reason, not as desirable as the Panini ones. But I've thought that the Radiating Rookies is an awesome card. I think that they've been doing some really cool things. So I'm excited to see that implemented into NFL and NBA. And then obviously the Golden Mirror super short prints is sort of something that I'm really intrigued by as well. I'd say I'm disappointed with the 2025 NBA Golden Mirror photo selections, but I do feel that basketball and football photography can lend itself to just some amazing imagery. So I'm hoping that Topps can really tap into that.
So you touched on this a little bit with your previous answer, and I was going to ask about it. I don't want to dwell on it too much because I know it can be a sore subject in certain fields, but you mentioned AI. Even in my untrained eye, I can see certain posts on Instagram sometime where someone has clearly used something to create. Can you tell like right away when it's been used? And then how do you feel about someone using AI to create an Instagram post if it makes their post maybe look better than if they had just tried to do it on their own?
Yeah, I can definitely tell. I think you see it the most in people's logos, like for their own card accounts. I would say 99% of logos that you see are AI, and they just all have a very similar style and color palette to them. So it's pretty instantly recognizable to me. But like I said, this is my professional job and it's not other collectors. And so if they have a tool that helps make them something that they enjoy, that's something that they couldn't do themselves. Like, I'm never going to knock anybody for using it, especially in this hobby. I think when you see Coca-Cola use exclusively AI for their holiday ad they came out with this year, that doesn't resonate as well with me.
Polar one and the Santa.
Yeah. If you look at the trucks in each shot, their wheels are entirely different. And it's just like, so that I don't like. But when collectors are trying to do something cool for their own hobby and their own collection, like, go right ahead.
Yeah. And of course, you already met those downtowns were just inexcusable and unforgivable and little stupid. They just looked dumb. Right. And everyone knew it. And, everyone could kind of tell. I do want to ask about your own collecting just a little bit, but I do have one last question. Will you go back and look at, say, previous years of cards and study them? And I'm thinking about the interview Josh Johnson, Cardboard Chronicles, did years ago with Jean from Arena Design, and of course her firm and Jean herself they're icons, right, in the card designing space. Will you go back and just sort of just browse and see where things used to be and where they are, and just try to sort of bring it all in, collect it all in, think it all in?
Yeah, 100%. I think the nice part for me being a card collector and a designer is when I'm going through cards, opening a box of cards, like I do get to look at it through a different lens where I just enjoy seeing the creative. And so I think that can make it a bit more fun. And like I mentioned, heritage, obviously tying previous designs into ultra modern is definitely why I'm drawn so much towards it, because it sort of revisits something from the 70s, or we're probably getting pretty close to the 80s right now. But just to see these sets come back to life, and like some of it, again, I kind of got back into the hobby in 2022, and obviously I was not born in the 70s or when some of these original sets were come out. So it's been a bit of a education process as well, seeing the heritage designs and then going back and being like, oh, okay, so this was from 1975, and wow, there's some awesome cards from 1975. Or so I definitely enjoyed that side of things and just revisiting past years and designs and sets.
So as we start to wind down, what is Matt the collector looking for right now? Are there certain cards, certain sets, certain players where if somebody out there has something you would appreciate if they were to reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually, starting last year, I put together a list of the top targets that I'm after. It was about 15 cards, and I think in the end I got maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they're usually like relatively tough cards to find. And so I just came up with my new list for 2026 as well. Some cards are the same, some are new, but it's a very eclectic mix of stuff that I'm sort of hunting for. Like there's a James Bond card in there, there's an Aubrey Plaza Parks and Rec card, Paul Correa Star Quest Gold is probably like the one that I want the most right now, just because I have such fond memories of Paul Correa when I was a kid. And so I tend to focus a little bit more on the cards off the beaten path of my normal collecting on that list. And honestly, I feel that my Gunnar Henderson and my Corbin Carroll collections are almost like complete for the time being for me and what I'm trying to do with them. And so I'm definitely trying to go back a little bit more and tap more into the guys that I remember watching as a kid, or just that sparked that sort of emotional reaction to me. Like I was a huge Nomar Garcia Parra and Chipper Jones fan. Those were my two idols growing up. And so learning about their cards has been a lot of fun, because I'm learning more about 90s sets that I wasn't necessarily collecting before, or even early 2000s. And then also just finding a new group of collectors to talk about them with as well. So you'll notice a lot of my sort of top targets are more emotional, I would say.
So if somebody would want to reach out to you and to make contact or to learn more about your work, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so they can reach me on Instagram at MattyH_cards, and that's the best spot to find me. I'm always there in the DMs chatting with fellow collectors. So that's definitely the best spot.
Thanks, Matt. This has been so interesting. Go out and check him out. Matty H Cards on Instagram. Just one of the most visually appealing Instagram feeds that you will ever find. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the kind words.